Hi, welcome to week 3. I'm doing this video from Montreal. I'm here, as you can see, I'm wearing this collar. My friend got inducted today, which is sort of like part 2 of an ordination service. So I got to be a reverend, which I am normally, but don't always wear a collar. So I'm sending you this video from Montreal where it's green and lovely and where it smells like croissants on the side of the street. And I hope that this finds you well. Just a note on writing. A lot of times I think when we write personally, or when we even study for the Bible, I think that we do it in this sort of like private solo devotional writing or maybe even devotional study of the Bible. And like anything, please make sure that this sort of like private personal devotional isn't your only encounter with scripture. The Bible is actually best studied and understood when we do it in community, which this weekend was a great reminder of being in the community of other people who are also committed to doing translating and reading scripture together for a community. And so the whole point of the discussion forums is to be a place for you to hear what your classmates are thinking and for you to even hear some of my own thoughts on this. If you do post early, I'm glad to see that and to read those comments, but make sure you do go back and you read through what others have posted so you can be part of the conversations. And to give you a bit of an incentive, I will try to contribute further to the discussions since you might be curious what the professor thinks, because you, after all, are paying for this course. And I want it to be worth your time and to add to those discussions. So note on grading, I am because I've been traveling, I am a little bit behind on your grading. I will try to get your BMA assignments from last week to you so that you can start seeing those comments, and you can always resubmit the comments that I give to you for feedback. You can resubmit that and you can use those for your final paper, because I really, please do take this assignment seriously, because I think the text boxes on the worksheet are a little bit deceptively small, which means that you're not really supposed to just write bullet points or even just a few sentences for those BMA assignment sections, but this is actually your chance to dive deeply into this passage in a sort of private way, but also in kind of a communal conversation with me and kind of using some things you might learn along the way from discussion posts. And this work isn't just fruitless, but it also goes towards your final paper. And I want those final papers to be a real, not only gift to you to like be able to dive deeply into one or two verses, but also perhaps if you do identify as a person of the Christian faith, that you can really sink your teeth deeply into a small passage. I think that's actually one of the most beautiful things about studying the Bible in this way. Is oftentimes I think we become large consumers of scripture, and we might read whole chapters or big chunks. And so while we're sort of doing whole chapters and big chunks across the class, this is an opportunity to really dive deeply into one or two verses. And it's actually a practice that regardless of, or if you do ministry kind of going in the future, it's really helpful practice to sort of like continue to mull over a text for an entire week, or for, in this case, like a semester of a course. So I hope that that's something that might be helpful for you moving forward. And then just a note on feedback. If you send me an email, please just expect to hear back a maximum of 48 hours. I have been traveling with a little bit of unpredictable internet in Montreal, and I apologize for any delays in communications. So please email me first with questions. And unless it's like an absolute emergency, then you can send me a text. I know that you're all busy and you have busy lives. And I trust that you're treating this class as adult learners, that you are. And I can see that that you all are using this class as an opportunity to be responsible, to take a large share of responsibility in your adult learning. And sometimes that means that you might have questions about deadlines or something in your life comes up. So please just reach out and be proactive in letting me know. I'll be more relaxed at the beginning of this course as we kind of figure out the rhythm together. But as we move towards the close of the semester, I will become a little more strict on deadlines. And that's just honestly for grading purposes, because I have a deadline that I have to turn your grades into the registrar. So just keep that in mind, but certainly, reach out if something comes up or if you have questions. As we begin Module 3, we're covering a lot of material here. So if Genesis and Exodus was sort of those like a first taster, we're doing the entire rest of the Old Testament, which, by the way, is 2/3 of the whole Bible in this next module. And the challenges of this particular module is just the large amount of material that we're going to be covering. And the way that it's structured is we're going to be looking at significant figures of the Old Testament, and it's a lot that's going on there. So it might feel as if we've really sped up quite a bit. And in particular, something for you to keep in mind is that your BMA assignment is going to be more time consuming because it's this particular week. You'll be doing all of step 2. So please, plan that within your weekly schedule. And it will require you to do some outside research and look at those outside sources. You should be able, and you should look at those Bible dictionary folder resources for your particular verse. And it's in the folder on the BMA section of Blackboard. You need to read the article that goes along with your book from the Bible and kind of sit in it and simmer and let those help you form your ideas for step 2. But you might be wondering, what exactly is a Bible dictionary? Well, it's a bit of a misnomer. I would think of maybe a Bible dictionary more like an encyclopedia. So most Bible dictionaries, like the Anchor Bible Dictionary, sometimes shortened to ABD, are multi-volume, and these are written by biblical scholars and experts in the field, and they're kind of arranged alphabetically A to Z or Z. If you need to look up something for the Gospel of Luke, you would look up Luke, and then it would say Gospel of. Or if you wanted to know something more about the city of Jerusalem, you'd look up Jerusalem in the J section. So that kind of gives you an idea of how you would look at a Bible dictionary if you were seeing all 8 or 9 volumes of it on a shelf. For each of your verses, they have there's specific sort of highlights to know and quirks for each. So I would encourage you to follow your gut in the questions that come up as you're researching, or the questions that sort of surface in your passage for each of them. And then think of me kind of as a tour guide for those important things to pay attention to. So let's say you're studying James. It's important for you to know the tension between faith and works and what those Greek words are and how that was interpreted by, say, like Martin Luther or Calvin in the Reformation, and how maybe James is operating differently than other books in the New Testament. So I'm kind of your guide to sort of say, okay, take a look at this particular word, or look at these words in tandem. Or, perhaps maybe you're studying the Psalms like we will be this week, and you run across the words righteousness and justice, which in Hebrew are mishpat and tzedakah. It's important to know that these 2 words get paired a lot together, and specifically in the Old Testament. And they're considered maybe different avenues for what the writers are trying to get at when it comes to thinking about how we're to live and how we're to behave justly, both sort of like personally and corporately, and even thinking about justice on systemic levels. And so those sorts of things, I'll kind of give you little clues to say, pay attention to this character, pay attention to that word, because that's a theme that might not necessarily surface because you're only doing 1 or 2 verses. That's why we did the larger literary context, so you might be able to pick up a few more words. So I'll try to give you some of that feedback, so then when you go back and look at your passages, you can kind of dig more deeply into that. And then just to close our time together, I know our discussion post at the end of the week is on Psalm 137, which is one of my favorite Psalms, also a very tricky Psalm in terms of what do we do, how do we interpret this, how do we use this in the life of the church, how are we to think of this as like a text that we use in worship? And one of my favorite poems, I think, which just offers a really unique window into thinking about particularly difficult texts of the Bible, but also really difficult sections that we might read in the Old Testament, such as like, what do we do with the text that tells us about, God being displeased with humanity that God's created and now, wants to wipe them out in the section on the flood, or, these different dark texts in the Psalms. And I hope this poem kind of gives you maybe a little bit of a unique angle into it. But the poem is called "Why Are Your Poems So Dark?" and it's by the poet Linda Pastan. So I'll read it to you. Why are your poems so dark? Isn't the moon dark too most of the time? And doesn't the white page seem unfinished without the dark stain of alphabets? When God demanded light, he didn't banish darkness. Instead, he invented ebony and crows and that small mole on your left cheekbone. Or did you mean to ask, why are you sad so often? Ask the moon. Ask what it has witnessed. I love the way this poem sort of reframes how we might think of dark texts or disturbing texts in the Bible, or even just in situations that we encounter, because I think certainly one of the hallmarks of the biblical text is that it's honest about our lives and our human condition. And it doesn't always tell the story in the way that we might want it to, or we think there's a gap missing, or maybe as you sort of peruse through the book of Judges, you see like it's just sort of continual chaos, and things are unraveling. And there's a refrain that happens in Judges that's, and everyone did what it was right in his own eyes. And as you read the stories, you think, if everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes, you can sort of see the impending doom. And likewise with this Psalm 137, there's this, it ends on this this dark note. And so I hope this poem maybe gives you a little bit of an avenue of what do we do with difficult and dark texts, and how does it actually speak towards the human condition and the sadness and the darkness in our world, particularly thinking this week of the children who and the shooting in Texas, and you know, the many stories that are coming and surfacing, or here in Canada, certainly throughout this last year, there's been a lot of unmarked graves of First Nations, which is their word for Native Americans. And so there's been a lot of research and sadness, and certainly the church has been involved, unfortunately, in the causing of some of these unmarked graves. And so as we encounter these dark things, what can biblical texts speak into sad times, and how can biblical text speak into our human condition, which is a sad, dark one sometimes? Perhaps that you've experienced that in your own personal life, or even just as you encounter in the news. And so anyway, I hope that some of these words both give you a pause to ponder, but also some strange comfort in the midst of it as well. So looking forward to digging into poetic and prophetic texts with you this week. That is I'd say that's my area of specialty, or certainly my greatest interest. And so I'm excited to look at these texts with you. Thanks. Bye.